For nearly 3 decades, ProviNET Solutions has been providing solutions you can trust.
It's National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and we've got a special guest in-house with us today. We're talking malware, intrusion, web app attacks, ransomware, IoT devices, and encrypted threats. You don't want to miss this webinar. Today's webinar is sponsored by SonicWall, a leader in cybersecurity defense systems and next-generation firewall devices. ProviNET is proud to partner with SonicWall for any next-gen firewall needs and has seen firsthand the capabilities and performance that SonicWall can deliver. If your organization is in the market for a next-gen firewall device or wants to learn more about what next-gen firewalls are, reach out to us today to learn more. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's October, and that means it's one of my favorite months of the year. Not because of all the pumpkin spice coffee or because of the obscene amounts of candy delivered at the end of the month by people dressed up in ridiculous costumes. It's one of my favorite months of the year because it's National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, which is a pretty spooky topic in and of itself. Today we're thrilled to have a special guest with us to talk more about cyber threats and cybersecurity. Tom, happy National Cybersecurity Awareness Month to you.
Sure. I am a SonicWall sales engineer covering the state of Illinois. I've been at SonicWall for a little over 2 years now, and for the previous 15 plus years in my career, I've spent on the enterprise side of IT, dealing with threats and infrastructure and securing infrastructure and making sure no one gets in.
Well, that's great to hear, Tom. I know that many of our engineering team members here at ProviNET, as well as many of our sales team members, get an opportunity to work with you regularly, and we really appreciate all of the contributions that you make to our organization and to our many customers. So thank you for that. Recently, SonicWall published the 2019 Cybersecurity Threat Report, and we'll get a link to that report in the description below if you want to check it out. It was really interesting to read about some of the global trends that in that report. Tom, talk to us a little bit about some of the trends that SonicWall is seeing for 2019.
An interesting time in the malware industry, per se, in that we've actually seen the number of malware attacks decrease significantly by 20%. But that doesn't mean that anyone's any safer. What it means is that those attacks are being more targeted now. A few months back, there was some ransomware that targeted municipalities down in Texas, and multiple municipalities were infected. My wife, who's a teacher at the public school system up here in Rockford, they were infected with ransomware at the beginning of the school year, and it took them 2 months to get any sort of technology back to the teachers.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's nasty. And how is all this getting in? It's getting in through the typical threat vectors: email, people clicking on bad web links. We're seeing an increase in encrypted threats. You know, encrypted threats were up 76% over the year. Mm-hmm. So that's a new front that everyone's seeing. So encrypted threats, for those of you who don't know, is HTTPS traffic. A normal firewall can't inspect it unless you're doing what we at SonicWall call DPI SSL, others call SSL decryption.
Okay, so that means it's some sort of a threat that somebody has taken intentional effort to encrypt and make it difficult for SonicWall or other firewall providers to actually inspect as the traffic is traversing the network. But with some of the more advanced capabilities that you guys have, you're able to unencrypt that traffic and inspect it to see if it's malicious in any way.
Correct.
Yeah.
And one of the other important things on the threat report is that a lot of people don't know that we actually publish this data out for anyone to see. If you go to securitycenter.sonicwall.com, mm-hmm. you can go out there and you can see what the current threat landscape looks like, and you can actually customize it via region. So if you want to only look at North America, you can look at North America and see what's going on in a near real time.
Really?
It's published 1 month behind.
Gotcha. That's a great resource. I was even unaware of that, but that's a great resource to know about. So thanks for sharing that. So 20% down in malware. I saw the report mentioned intrusions attempts are up a little bit. Web app attacks are up about 11%, it looks like. Ransomware is still definitely a threat, and we've seen an increase in ransomware year over year of about 15%. Talk to me a little bit about IoT devices, because it looks like from your report, malware from those devices is up 55%.
The manufacturers of the IoT devices not providing adequate security, where the default username and password is admin password or something like that, and it's published out to the web, and people are finding those, and they're launching botnets or just malware attacks that can go and scan and deliver a whole host of malware to anyone they try to target.
Yeah,
and that's a real problem that we face in the industry, and that everyone else faces in the industry. Is you have all these low-cost devices that have almost no security built into them.
and these devices are typically almost like a set it and forget it type of a device, right?
Correct.
You set it up.
Great example is an HVAC system. A lot of the HVAC systems in large buildings, they're not secured properly. Luckily, in the past, they've never connected them to the internet, but now they're connecting to the internet, where someone might be able to go in and turn your AC up or all the way down, or turn the heat all the way up and roast you out. And if you're in a medical setting, that could be a huge problem.
Of course, you mentioned the encrypted threats, fastest growing segment of threats in the threat report, growing by 76%. So what that tells me is that threat actors are really getting more sophisticated in the types of cyber attacks that they're launching. It's not just go ahead and download the latest or greatest flavor of ransomware or malware anymore. It's really taking some more intentional steps to really try to bypass some of the threat mitigation steps that organizations have put into place.
One of the downsides of Google demanding all the web traffic be encrypted is you have places like Let's Encrypt that'll give you a free SSL cert for 90 days, and it's all done API in the background, so all programmatically, and you can go out and you can encrypt stuff with a click of a button.
Yeah.
We're going to see more and more of that as we go in the future.
Right. Well, there were some other staggering statistics on the total quantities of attacks for each of these categories too. I see 4.8 billion with a B malware attacks, 2 trillion with a T intrusion attempts, 19.2 million web app attacks, 110 million ransomware incidents, 13.2 million malware infections through IoT devices, and 2.5 million encrypted threats. Break down each of these threats for us, Tom. For someone who may be brand new to some of these terms, can you explain which each of these types of threats are and why we're seeing some of them more prevalent than others?
Back for a second and talk about where these numbers came from.
Okay.
So we offer our threat report that comes out twice a year, but as I mentioned before, the Security Center site, you can go and see it updated in near real time. But we say that we have a ton of sensors out there. Essentially, the sensors are customers' firewalls deployed throughout the world.
Okay.
So we have a large deployment of firewalls all the way throughout the world, hundreds of thousands of them sitting out there collecting and being attacked. Mm-hmm. And that's where all of this data comes from. Mm-hmm. So all those numbers you just said was only a SonicWall environment. So in the SonicWall ecosystem, we saw 2 trillion intrusion attempts.
Oh, wow.
Which is absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now you take into account all the other vendors and all the other spaces, and it's just absolutely astronomical. So you look at that 2 trillion number and you go, that's just absurd. And it can be a little overwhelming to know where that number came from. And it really is just an intrusion attempt with someone, hey, I'm pinging you. Hey, I'm trying to telnet to you. I'm trying to use a well-known port to get into you. It's just most of that's all automated. And where we see that attack successful is in the IoT or a misconfigured device where passwords are not thought of or they're set at defaults. Malware attacks, 4.8 billion, that's a lot.
Yeah.
But a lot of that is also automated malware attacks where it's going and pinging websites and saying, all right, I'll try to do this injection to see if I can get control of this site, try to get some data in here. Most of it isn't consumer facing. Most of it is actually business facing on the back end side of things. But on that same side where the ransomware or the malware comes from is consumers clicking on bad links or to hijack sites. So if a actor gets a hold of a business site in the background, and then you go visit that business site, you could be infected because they got control of that asset. And that's where we run into a big problem for consumers that just go and, the site looks legitimate and they don't know. And if they're a yes clicker, they're going to get something bad in the environment.
Right. Let's shift gears a little bit here and tell us what are some things that SonicWall is doing today to combat some of these threats that are out there?
So a lot of the threat vectors that we look at and see and realize that, most businesses don't have dedicated IT security staff.
Right.
And that is a real problem.
Right.
So that's where at SonicWall we've taken the approach of how do we automate as much of this as humanly possible to do our vision, which is automated real-time breach detection and prevention. With that said, we still rely on MSSP partners such as yourself that are able to look at this raw, absurd amount of volume of data and be able to pull something out of it that goes, maybe I want to pay attention to this. Because there's just so much noise that it's hard to hear anything through that level of noise.
Yeah.
And the other thing that the industry has moved to for a long time and that we support fully is the whole model of layered security defense. So you can't have just a next generation firewall.
Right.
You can't have just antivirus. It's all got to be in playing together. A lot of customers say that, hey, you offer gateway antivirus services, and that's true, but that's not a replacement for desktop or server AV.
Tom, tell us, what does SonicWall recommend from a cybersecurity campaign perspective?
Starts with our next generation firewall. The SonicWall device, we are a leadership in the total cost of ownership category where we're able to do more with less. And that's what's being asked of businesses over and over and over again. Do more with less. We understand that and we do that. We have multiple packages within the firewall, such as what we call CGSS or AGSS. Essentially, it's our support bundle. It's gateway antivirus, anti-spyware, content filtering, IPS, IDS, of course. And then with our AGSS bundle, it also includes our Capture ATP service, which is our next generation multi-engine sandbox, which sends unknown files up to the cloud for analysis. And in there, we have one of our patent pending technologies called RTDMI, which is real-time deep memory inspection. And that essentially all it does is trick malware to execute in a way, because malware is now being written to bypass sandboxes. So if it detects it's in a sandbox, then it just doesn't execute. And that's where we've come in with the solution to say, all right, we won't allow it to check to see whether it's in a sandbox, and we'll force it to execute.
Wow.
And that does a lot. And the way that typical flows is that, the file comes in, it goes through our 62 virus scanners, and then if it's still an unknown file, then it gets sent up to RTDMI. RTDMI is capturing an amazing amount of malware. And most of that malware is focused around Word documents and PDFs. That is the current threat vector in the second half of 2019 that we're seeing people take advantage of.
Okay.
So if you are not scanning those documents, then you're really opening yourself up to a world of hurt, because they really can be malicious.
Yeah.
In addition to that, moving outside of the next generation firewall, we have our platform, which we call Capture Security Center.
Okay.
Capture Security Center is our single pane of glass management site, and then it's going to be evolving into a single pane of glass monitoring site as well, where you can do central management of devices, but you can also do central monitoring of the devices. So if you have a location that has 10 devices, you'll be able to see what's going on with all 10 devices threat-wise at a single splash screen and see what actions you need to take, if any.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about this Capture ATP cloud service that you guys have, because I just think it's so cool. So let's pretend that I get a Dropbox link from somebody wants to share a file with me, and I click on that Dropbox link and I start downloading that file. firewall is scanning, the DPI SSL next-gen firewall is scanning that file, and it says, hey, there's something fishy about this Dropbox file that you're trying to download. It's going to take that file then and send it up to the Capture ATP cloud, where you guys are going to put it into a secure sandbox off my network, and you're going to do some deep inspection on that Dropbox file that I'm trying to download, and you're either going to pass or fail that file. And if it passes, you're going to send it back to me, and I'm never even noticed that you guys did that. If it fails, then it's going to prevent that file from downloading for me and going and infecting my network, right?
To take the file, it's going to send it up to the cloud. At the cloud level of Capture ATP, we're going to look at the program hash, which is just the little piece that says, have I seen this before? If it's seen that program hash before and knows that it's bad, it gives almost an instantaneous result. Hey, this file's bad. Stop what you're doing. Don't allow this to download. If it goes through, then it goes through our virus scanners, our 62 virus scanners, our 3 reputation databases. If it makes it through all that, then it goes to the sandbox engine. So it starts with our multi-engine sandbox, which is the hypervisor, emulation, and virtualization. And then we also have the memory, which is the RTDMI technology that goes and inspects this. While this is happening, we have this option in the firewall called block until verdict. Block until verdict will stop the user from downloading this file while all this processing is running in the back end.
Okay.
This processing can take a couple of seconds all the way up to a minute or two, depending on what that file is actually trying to do.
Think about that logistically. I mean, for that to only take a minute or two max is really impressive. I mean, that you guys are providing that sandbox environment apart from my network and really doing some deep inspection and even test execution on files that maybe aren't recognized is really impressive. And then, giving a result on that back in a minute or 2 or 3 minutes or whatever it is really impressive. It's not like it's taking, days or weeks or months to do that inspection. It's happening in near real time.
Yep, and if you compare that to some of the other vendors out there, let's look at Microsoft, for example. Their advanced solution takes a lot longer to execute than what we're able to do.
Yeah. Well, that's really impressive, Tom. I know ever since I learned about Capture ATP, I've been a fan. You guys have had that for a couple of years now, right? And so I've been trying to advocate for that in as many conversations as I can whenever we're talking about cybersecurity. But this is kind of the first time hearing about that RTDMI as well, and that's part of that Capture ATP cloud suite is what I'm hearing.
No additional cost with their AGSS package.
Well, so we covered next-gen firewall. We covered all of the sort of services that get bundled with that next-gen firewall. The subscription services to get the real-time definition updates for the viruses and malware and all that kind of stuff. The support, the IPS, IDS, intrusion detection and intrusion prevention, Capture ATP. I know you guys have a couple other products as well related specifically to like email gateway security or antivirus gateway security. Talk a little bit about those and how that's part of the comprehensive suite as well.
So it goes into that layered security defense model that I keep talking about. And all of our products are integrated with Capture ATP now. So if you're using our email security product, which it can either be on-prem or hosted in the cloud by us and works with O365 or Google, and it'll detect a file, it'll send that file up to Capture ATP for analysis. And in addition to that, we also offer the link blocking in our hosted email security, where if someone sends a bad link in, not only does it get scanned the time that it comes in, but it also gets rescanned at the time of click. So if someone then compromises a site down the road and it's a bad site, when they go to click on it, our Capture ATP network knows that and has marked that site as bad. In addition to that, we have our SMA product line, which is our remote access security. That's a huge threat vector for enterprises and mid to large size businesses, in that they have a lot of remote users now, and they're working in Starbucks. If their laptop's compromised and they bring it onto the network, guess what? Your network is now compromised. And that's where this product provides secure remote access for users no matter where they're at. We can run checks on it to make sure they have antivirus installed, they have certain Microsoft updates installed, or whatever have you. It's a really powerful engine.
That's
We
incredible.
also offer the cloud access security, which I briefly talked about, which is an API plugin for many products out in the market to scan files and emails.
SonicWall has developed a really revolutionary tool for us to be able to use in conjunction with Microsoft and their Azure platform up in the cloud to really kind of help protect our tenant inside of the Microsoft cloud. Talk a little bit about the NSV product.
Sure, the NSV is a great product, and it doesn't just exist in Azure. It exists on-prem, so VMware, Hyper-V. It exists in the cloud, so AWS, Azure. It's also going to be looking at KVM, which is a lower cost alternative to some of the hypervisors. It really takes the next generation firewall and puts it in the cloud, and it lets you manage it in a familiar interface. It has all the same functionality and capabilities that an on-prem firewall does, and it protects the environment substantially. Through my corporate experience back in the enterprise space, actually deploying firewalls in the cloud and working with other customers and here at SonicWall, there's an impression that I don't need security when I'm in Azure running workloads. And everyone's still using the security groups to lock down access for their workloads. And that's great, but you're going back and not using next generation firewalls at that point. You're going back to an old school Cisco PIX, for example, that kind of generation where it's just port based. It's aware of nothing.
Right.
It's just, yes, this is port 80, let it through.
Right.
And it doesn't do any scanning. I think we'll see a lot of breaches in the future based on those workloads that are up in Azure that are not secured adequately.
Right.
We see a lot of stuff that's misconfigured in Azure, and it keeps happening and happening. It's nothing against Azure. It's just so easy to do. And that's where it comes down to having a provider like yourself that knows what you're doing in Azure and able to configure it and configure your entire environment outside of the next generation firewall, but in the next generation firewall, making sure all the traffic in that tenant goes through a next generation firewall to be scanned and scrubbed appropriately.
Well, Tom, we can't thank you enough for joining us today. This has really been an important discussion. We're grateful for you and your expertise in this arena, and we're grateful for our partnership with SonicWall, too. If you have any other questions about cybersecurity or next-generation firewalls or any of the products or services that we talked about today, please reach out to us and visit us at www.provinet.com and connect with us to learn some more. Thanks so much. Have a great day. Goodbye, everyone.